I am very pleased today. I'm usually pleased, but today I'm really pleased to introduce a guy who I consider a friend. He may not consider me a friend, but I consider him a friend. My wife Susie and I have known Brad and Tricia Raffensperger for many years, and I got to serve on a building committee with him. I was actually on staff, and he was a volunteer committee member. Extremely valuable. We were building a 130,000 square foot worship center, childcare center. The whole project was about $20 million. And it was very important to do it well and do it right. And his input, while he's not very vocal, not very verbal, but when he speaks, it's like EFET and everybody listens. So I have a ton of respect for Brad, and he is a civil engineer, and he also has an MBA. And as you know, he's our Georgia Secretary of State. He's just a genuine, decent guy, and I really respect and appreciate him being with us today. So Brad, with no further ado, I would turn the program over to you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, John and Susie are great friends of ours, going back to the Mount Pisgah days. Well, it's really an honor to be here to speak before Vietnam veterans. With John and I were talking about the ages. I think the last time, probably 1952 is when the lottery system went out. I know when I turned, I'm born in 55, so registered for the draft, but it was, past that point. But you all served in an incredible, challenging time in America's past, where a lot of issues were going on in the country, and then you were out there called to serve and served honorably. And so I think we took a lot of good lessons out of that. I think because when you came back, sometimes you weren't treated with the respect that you deserved. I think the next generation really made it a really important part that we always respected our veterans. I think that's a good thing, because you lay it all out in the line, and many did not come back. It's also really disheartening, in our own city of Johns Creek, that we had the Vietnam Wall that was desecrated, vandalized. And when you see that happen, it's very troubling, because you all called to serve and you served honorably. It's also great to see that you started off with a prayer and a pledge, and as far as Star Spangled Banner. So God bless you all and appreciate your service. We all did. In elections, that really what you fought for and what many of your friends died for, and going all the way back to the first war, the Revolutionary War, it was really the right to vote, to express freely who we wanted us to be. And we're having that discussion today about America, does it need further improvements? Well, we've had a 250-year process of further improving the nation. Each generation it gets a little bit better. And so right now in Georgia, even though we have COVID-19 and all the challenges that we had, Georgia is one of the few states that we actually allowed and made sure that we kept the three options open in the primary election we just had. So we had a very strong and robust absentee program. And obviously, if you're 65 and older, and if you served in Vietnam, you're over 65, we have no excuse absentee voting. And so if you voted absentee, then you could just put that little check marks due to your age, and then you always be registered, and you'll be getting your absentee ballot coming up in the fall election. And so that's really important. Some of you may even have a runoff, depending on some of those congressional districts. There'll be runoffs for those. So this is a statewide organization, so you may be participating in the runoff coming up in August. But for the November election, you'll be rolled over and you can vote. There's over 500,000 people, the voters that have already will be on that absentee roller list because of either health challenge or due to age. And so we know that we'll have at least 500,000 people vote absentee in the fall. But also in the primary, we wanted to make sure we had a robust early vote process. We had 326,000 voters vote in the early vote process, which was record turnout. And then on the day of election, we had 860,000 people show up. And that was tremendous turnout. The challenge that it really had is that because people were spaced out in lines, and because we have poll workers stepped out for a season, I think people now recognize how important a poll worker is, because if you don't have poll workers, it's very difficult to run an in-person election. The average age of poll workers prior to COVID-19 was 72. And when COVID hit, a lot of poll workers stepped out. And so we right now are doing a very strong poll worker recruitment program. And that's one of the 4 key areas that we're looking at to encourage the counties to do poll worker recruitment. So I want to encourage you, if you know people, and I wouldn't ask this of people that are over the age of 70. And so it's really not so much for perhaps you because you're concerned about your health. I get that. But if you know folks that are involved in Rotary, any kind of service organization, or if you have a group of a scout pack that are working on their Eagle badge, is have that troop just adopt 1 precinct. It would be absolutely tremendous. So we've met with service fraternities and sororities. I've reached out to the Rotary because Rotary says we don't do politics. I get that, but maybe your local organization would like to adopt just 1 precinct. And so we're doing a major outreach to people for to become a poll worker. So that's really going to be important. The other thing that we want to work on is more enhanced on, in-person and on-hand training of the poll workers for the fall election. We think that's really important. And then we'll also see technical support. And so we have right now about 2,600 precincts, and we want to make sure that there's someone with an IT tech background in every precinct. So when these things happen, people talked about the machines didn't work. When we actually unpacked the whole thing, there was only 14 pieces of equipment in the entire state that did not actually work out of over 30,000. What it really was is that because of COVID, the counties weren't able to do poll worker training so people could figure out what about this situation here. And so to have a tech there that understands, oh, this is what you do. It's really no different than, if you all have your home computers and something goes out, if you're really tech savvy, you can figure it out. But if you aren't tech savvy, you call your grandson, who's probably 5th grade, 6th grade, and they come over and they're figuring it out. Hey, it's the same in our house. And so that's one thing that really would make it important. And so we'll be looking at those 2 key areas. And the other thing we're looking at is increasing more polling locations, because the only way to decrease the lines is actually you need more machines, so you increase throughput, or you need more precincts, and handle, so for your people, so if you have to handle for your voters. It's that combination, more machines or more precincts. And so we really need more places to vote. The new machines, if you use them for in-person voting, everyone's really excited. Yes, it takes a little bit longer because you're waiting for that ballot to print out. But people now can hold that piece of paper. They can look at, oh, here's my choices. Who do I want for Congress? Who do I want for Senate? Who do I want for county commissioner? Who do I want for the water and sewer board? Whatever that race is, people can look at that before they actually have cast their ballot. And they take it over to the scanner, press that button, and then it's counted. One of the things that we know that you really feel comfortable with is that the system, when you have a ballot marking device, we don't get into what is your intent. Because when we counted all those absentee ballots, we had over 1.1 million. What you saw is that when they were told to fill in the bubbles, well, some people didn't follow those directions. That's all okay. They put an X there or other things. So as it goes through the scanner, then some of those got kicked out, and then you had to have a team of 3 people look at what was the exact intent. And so that took a little bit longer. And so those are the things that the challenging systems that you have as you're working with COVID-19. We had right now in the last primary 2.2, and that was record turnout. We're expecting for the fall, we could have up to 5.5 million people, double what we just had. And so we really need to prepare for big numbers. And so that's what everyone in the counties are doing. We're excited that we had a fellow that was one of people coming to hear me do a press conference a week after the election at Park Tavern. He threw out 2 ideas. And it's very interesting. One was, hey, what about opening up, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium? Well, the Hawks Arena has been opened up for early voting for Fulton County, and we think that's a good idea. And then the other idea was something we wanted to pursue, and we weren't able to get that through the General Assembly, was, let's say you lived in Cherokee County, but you went to church in Fulton County, and that your church actually had a precinct there, and that's where all your friends were. Well, right now, you couldn't actually become a precinct worker because you'd be out of county. And so we wanted to change that state law. And unfortunately, the General Assembly didn't move that across because the session was very abbreviated. It was to come back and really work on the budget. But that's another idea that we want to institute next year, because we think that'll help really encourage poll worker participation. We really want to make sure that we encourage pre-election day voting options. So we expect that there'll be strong absentee participation. And one of the things that we think will make it streamlined and easier for voters to use, we are building out a portal. So if you did not vote absentee, but you'd like to vote absentee, then you can do that by going to the Secretary of State portal and putting in your information. What that'll do is automatically enter you into our electronic registration database called eNet. And that'll streamline the whole process. Then we can get you an absentee ballot. It also works in conjunction, really seamlessly with the counties, but it also takes out that whole transposing when people get on their typewriters or their keyboards and they're punching in letters and numbers. It'll really help eliminate some of that human error. So we think that'll be a more efficient way of working forward, and we'll have some time to plan since it's the November election. We're not able to do that with COVID jumping up on us in March and then having the primary so soon. So that'll be one area to really streamline that, and then obviously the 3 weeks of early voting. So that gives you a big broad brush overview of where we are with elections. I did mention, since this is a business association, you should be really excited. John and I talked about that briefly.
Brad, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah.
I really want to hear what you have to say here, but we have had a number of questions come up. Would you mind?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, let's do those, and then we'll maybe spin off to talk about corporations.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Let's see here. I'm just going to read these, and I'm not going to edit them. Okay. Stacey Abrams has become an embarrassment to the state of Georgia. Why don't you challenge her to a debate and set the record straight?
Well, that'd be a great idea. I'm going to write that one down. So challenge her to a debate and set the record straight. The thing is that she's really not running for anything, but what she's really doing is she's got a great fundraising scheme or scam. She was just fined $50,000 for, she wasn't, but the organization that was supporting her was, because of what they were doing. Because what she said, first of all, is that she hasn't, I recognize her, maybe she will move off that issue, but she said that Georgia wasn't a place easy to vote. We right now have over 7 million people that are registered to vote in Georgia. That's a record number. We also just had record turnout in the election. And so she's the person that didn't win the governorship race and still hasn't conceded defeat. But I like that idea. So challenge her for a debate. I'll write that one down. I'll run that by my team.
The next question is, can you explain the jungle primary for our U.S. Senate race?
Okay. Yeah, because Senator Isaacson retired, what happens is that you have a jumbled primary, so everyone can enter. And I understand that there's over 20 people that enter that race. Obviously, I understand that there's 2 Republicans have entered, but a whole slew of Democrats, also some independents. There's some bigger names in that race, but there's up to 20 folks. What will happen is in November, you'll be looking at, for that U.S. Senate seat, you'll get to make your selection. If no one gets over 50%, and I would venture to say, if you wanted to make book on this one, I think there'll be a runoff, because no one's going to get, with that number of folks, no one will get over 50%. So the top two vote getters will then run off in the first week in January, and that will be then the next U.S. Senator for that seat to replace obviously Senator Isaacson's seat for the final 2 years of that term, and that'll get us back to then a regular election with the partisanship that the partisan primaries that you normally have in June. So like Senator Perdue ran for re-election. No one ran against him on the Republican side. Several Republicans ran. Democrats run on the other side, and Ossoff is running against Senator Perdue. So that's what we normally see, Republican versus a Democrat and perhaps a Libertarian. But so that'll be really, you have to have 50+1 in the state of Georgia. And that really happens right now. You're seeing that really in effect, not so much, but we had 5 or 6 people, running for these several congressional seats. And now the top 2 vote getters in 3 congressional seats. One is a Democrat race down in the 1st district or 2nd district down in Savannah. And then obviously the 9th and the 14th in Northeast and Northwest Georgia and the Republican side. And those will be August runoffs for that. Those are just for the party nominations, but the same kind of concept. So obviously, the Republican side, Senator Loeffler, Congressman Collins, and then several host of other people, about 20 folks are running in that primary.
What's the minimum age to be a poll worker?
16.
16.
So many people don't realize that. So, right. So people that are in high school, these students that are in high school, people working on their Eagle badge. It's a great way. And it also, we say volunteer, but it actually pays, but it pays more than jury duty. It'd be $100 to $200. There'll be training, and there'll be, at least minimum of 2-hour online training. Now that we have a bit more time, it'll be hands-on training. But we'd love to have, encourage our younger voters and young 16, 17-year-old voters.
That's terrific. I think that's a great idea.
Come out and volunteer to be a poll worker.
It's $100 an hour then, right?
No. It's a long day. We say it's 7 to 7, but you're showing up at 6 o'clock, and if anything happens, the machines get shut down for a little bit. You can be there till 7, 8, 9.
Speaking of the machine, what was the primary motivation or trigger to create or to have new voting hardware? Was it inability for some people to access it, or was it just?
It was age. The old DRE touchscreen technology we had, that was actually brought into service in 2002 under Secretary of State Kathy Cox. So it had been around now for 18 years. The technology was outdated, but also over time, what people really, so there's always that, stirring within people, the concern is, where's a paper ballot? So how do I really check that it really was cast properly? So now that you have a paper ballot, what that lets us do is audit an election. So this last primary election, Fulton County did an audit of one of the races. And so we actually could verify that truly was, the winner was actually who it was, who was projected, based on the electronic count, if that makes sense.
So the audit, actually, someone physically read the hard copy ballots and verified the electronic.
You'll look at this, and that'll actually happen in every county after the November election. So let's say for a race, and it's released that the Senate race went 55-45. Well, the county will actually, and let's say that county had a 55-45 Senate race. It's pretty well conclusive who won, but they'll actually pull out a sample size of those ballots. They'll read, and then what they'll do is they'll get within 90% verification, and so it's really much higher tolerances, and it verifies that it actually was a 55-45, and that gives you confidence. If the evening news said it's a 55-45 race or 51-49 race, you really want to know that's what it truly was. And when you do the audit of the actual paper ballot of those names, it's just really hand count of a sample size. It verifies who the winner really was. And so it really gives you that security. Oh, we got it right. And that way you may be disappointed in some of the races. You may be excited. And likewise, people that were rooting for the other person, but everyone will have that confidence that we got it right from the standpoint of running the election.
Well, speaking of that, how do you know that your absentee ballot is accepted and actually cast? Is there any way to know that?
Well, if you go to your county, will keep track of that. And so you can actually look at that. So it's in there. It's on your My Voter page that your ballot has been recorded. And so we keep track of what numbers were mailed back. And so you really should be able to tally that up. And then we also, that'll be part of the audit process. And so, it'll be not just the electronic ballots that were done, the ballot marking devices that were done on election day, also the 15 early days of voting, plus the Saturday of early voting, but it'll also be the absentee. So everything gets audited in that process. And so you'll have that confidence that it was really secure.
There's a lot of these questions keep coming, so bear with us. A week after the primary that Fulton County was still counting ballots, where can I find the vote total?
Yeah, that's on their website now. So that's been released by Fulton County, and you could also go to our website because all those results now have been certified.
So do I have to apply for an absentee ballot for the runoff election, even though I had one for the primary vote?
If you're when we sent out the absentee ballot applications, there was on that the check mark, and don't have the sheet in front of me, but it said, "Are you over 65?" You would have marked yes, I'm over 65, then you could then they'll get it automatically. So if you check that box, or if you have a disability, you can check that out. But if you're say 35 to 45, shouldn't be any too many benefits on that. But I don't know if your organization takes in some young folks in your organization, how broad your membership is, but typically you check that box and you'd be signed up. But you could also go to your county's website and make sure that you are on that list.
Okay, and Greg Studdard wins the prize of the longest question so far. I have served as a volunteer poll watcher both inside and outside for at least 4 elections, runoffs, etc., since 2016. There have been a lot, just sit down and relax, it'll be a while. There have been a lot of improvements since 2016, but there is a lot of work needed. My question, there is a question. My question, I'm sorry, Rich, Greg, I'm picking on you. My question is, what efforts are you making to encourage improvements in how county boards of registration and elections can improve their efficacy or efficiency, whichever the word is, and transparency in future runoffs and elections? There is a shared responsibility with VREs in your office for planning ahead to protect ballot access. Denying responsibility does not help. We all need to pull together to expand and protect ballot access. I'm going to take a nap now. You know what the question was in there?
Well, I think that the counties understand coming up to the November election that we've been saying this since January before COVID, but even in spite of COVID, we had record participation, in the primary. And so we believe that when we tell people that there'll be over 5 million people voting in the fall, your county election boards understand that. So right now they're working on 3 things. Number one, if they had an issue with any technical, glitches, they didn't feel that their poll workers could handle some of that. They want to make sure that they have technical staff, IT staff in every precinct. And so they're working on that. The vendor that we selected will have about over 1,000 people from their tech support staff dispersed throughout the state. But we have 2,600 precincts. The counties are reaching out to their actual county employees that are on their IT staff, people that have some background, to help train them up to leverage those efforts. And then the other really cool story is that already some of the IT companies that are located in Fulton County have reached out to the Fulton County Election Board and say, hey, we'd like to volunteer some of our people that work in our IT departments. They're guys that are writing software code, hardware developer, all those type of folks that are good with technology, and they're going to volunteer to adopt a precinct. And so I think that's really going to help the counties to really manage any kind of issues. They're minor issues, but what happens when it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes to really solve that problem, all of a sudden your lines get longer because you're not getting your throughput. So they understand that's really important. Number 2 would be poll worker recruitment, and then poll worker training, which are interrelated. With COVID-19, one of the challenges that the counties had is that they really couldn't do a lot of training. Once about March 15th onward, they couldn't do in-person training just because of the separation. But now they're looking at how do we do, training of our poll workers, on-hands training with separation. So you're looking at, getting a larger space so you can space people out, in a, maybe a more open environment, a pavilion type where the air blows through, but it's not an enclosed environment, or something like the World Congress Center, where the absentee ballots were counted in Fulton County, which would be a great place to do also poll worker training because you can space people out. So looking at that, so poll worker training. And then the counties are also looking at, identifying where they can have locations, for additional precincts. And that really requires when there's an area, a church, a fire hall, a school, we need locations where you can have your precincts so we can make sure that we can manage the lines. We'll be also getting out more data of the election, and so that counties can really plan. We don't know what you can run about how many, what your throughput is per day per machine, and knowing that, and then how many people you have in a precinct, how many registered voters you have in a precinct. You say, well, this is how many machines I need, or I need to cut that precinct in half, or I need to cut it divided by 3, things like that. We want to get that data out them so they can plan for their elections better.
This is my question. Who does you mentioned a while ago about the auditing, where you physically hand count ballots and matched up against the electronic ballot. Who does that? Are those volunteers? Are those? That's
generally that is the county election director, her assistant, and another person. But then whenever you do that, there's actually observers that come. So there'll be typically a person from the Democrat, Republican Party, and then also you would have perhaps Libertarian, and then just maybe it's a couple outside observers, and they can watch that whole process to make sure that as you're going through that process, it's really like being a poll watcher, a poll observer at a precinct. It's the same idea. So you can actually watch the absentee ballot process go forward at the audit process.
The last question I have right now is, will you be sending out absentee ballot applications to all registered voters for the November election as you did for the primary? And if not, why not?
Cost. That program that we just ran was over $8 million, about $8.1 million. And so we believe that the portal would be much more efficient, because what that really will do will capture everyone that wants to vote absentee and actually then enter them in the ENET. And because you won't have people inputting that by hand, that really the voter is the one that will be pulling up the information. Then he'll be able to he or she'll be able to find their voter registration number, be able to put their information in. It'll make it more seamless and just help eliminate some of that human error.
So we will be going to your portal, the Secretary of State portal, and Susie and I will actually do our absentee ballots application, whatever, online.
Yeah, well, unless you're on the rollover list. And so if you're already on the rollover list, and there's over 500,000 people on the rollover list. So there were about 1.1 million people that voted total absentee, and close to half of those were already qualified to be on the rollover list due to age or underlying health condition.
Yeah. How do you know if you're on the rollover list?
Because you put the you check the box. Yeah. If you're over 65, you qualify for being on the rollover list. And you had to just, when you had your application, if you remember, you could.
Yeah, I know. But some of the people on this call may not remember that far back. In fact, some of us don't remember what we had for breakfast. So how would we verify?
You'll be on the list, and you go to your county election website, and you can check to see if you're on the rollover list, if you're already set up to get absentee.
All right, thank you. Now, the other thing we talked about, which is very interesting, please, changing gears here. Go ahead.
Well, since it's a business association, I know that elections, that's the really sexy issue. Everyone wants to talk about that. But the Secretary of State's office also handles corporate registrations. And last year in 2019, we had record corporation formation in the state of Georgia, and that's a good thing. And what's really interesting, in spite of COVID, we have actually had really strong, from March onward, very strong corporation formation. I think that just goes to the heart of the American entrepreneur, that they always believe that, even though it's a dark day, it's going to be a good day for them. And we never believe that we're the ones that are going to go out of business. Maybe some other guy, but we always figure, well, we'll figure out a way to survive. But it's really exciting, because that's new business formation, and that'll be more jobs for Georgians, in the coming future. So we're excited about that. We're also looking at a very strong program, working with the governor. He's done an awful lot of work looking at how do we streamline business licensing, how do we remove some barriers, particularly for those occupational licensing. And I think there'll be a strong push, next legislative session. So we're excited about that. Also, we're looking at some other formation. If you're looking at forming a corporation, there is some low interest loans that are available. And many Georgia entrepreneurs took advantage of that. And that comes through our securities division. It's really a small group of folks, but they're very efficient with that. They also manage and look out on the charities. Because with COVID, we've had a lot of people spring up, trying to figure how to get your hard-earned dollars out of your pocket into their pockets. And not all charities are honest charities. They're really scams. And so we're really been working and very vigilant. And so those are the main areas that we work with in the Secretary of State's office. Obviously, right now, our focus is the runoff election, making sure that's a strong turnout and a successful turnout, and then really working with the counties and giving them the information so that we can have a great November, because we're expecting record turnout.
That's a great sign. And you would think it'd be the opposite. There wouldn't be that many people actually starting business. What you hear mostly about are people going out of business, right?
Well, I think what COVID really, as Warren Buffett says, it's when the tide goes out, you realize he was swimming naked. And I think what COVID really made us realize is that we need to make stuff in America. And I get that. We need to make them in America, but I think we really need to make it in Georgia too. So that we really, because Georgia is what I care about. It's wonderful when they do things in Montana or whatever else, but I want to make sure we make things in Georgia. So when you have corporations being formed in Georgia, then that's really creating jobs for Georgians.
Yeah.
And so
Great.
That's very important.
Great. Thank you so much. This was, you talk fast when you're on the screen. I've never heard you talk so much in such a short period of time, Brad. I'm absolutely astonished that you covered so much in a short. I mean, I've been around you, and you're not a Southern drawl kind of a thing, but I've just never heard quite that much coming at me. So I got to take it.
I was afraid you're going to cut me off, so I got to cram a lot in a short period of time. But with that accent I got, just remember, I wasn't born here, but I got here as soon as I could, and we got here in '82. Most of the people that are out there voting in Georgia, they're younger than longer. We've lived here almost 40 years now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I still owe you for the chair I broke when we were over at your house trying to get you elected to Johns Creek City Council. I don't know how much I owe you, but I still owe you for that. So.
Well, that goes back to why we need to make things in America. When it was made in America, it didn't collapse. We bought some place, the cheapest dollar. Things didn't last. We got to get things back to lasting.